Hi, I'm going to show you how to change strings now. This is my perfect setup. I've got the dining table with a nice cloth on it to stop it getting scratched, and I've already prepared the guitar by taking some of the strings off. This is a good idea because if you take all the strings off, sometimes the bridge can slip out of alignment, and it's a bit tricky to get it back because there's springs inside the guitar that are kind of pulling the bridge back. So keep 2 or 3 strings on just to keep a bit of tension. With the guitar with the Floyd Rose, it also makes it easier to access the Allen bolts, which keep the strings in place as well. So if the bridge is sitting too far back, it's difficult to get your Allen key into the end of the bolts. So first one, I'm going to do the thick E string, the fat E string, and I'll just pour myself some Ernie Ball Super Slinkies. With the Floyd Rose, you don't need the ball end, so the first thing I do is chop that off, and then feed the loose end into the gap between. There's a little square block, which when you've loosened the Allen bolt, the block kind of loosens up and it sort of floats around a little bit. You can insert the string between the block and the brass saddle, and then it looks like I could have done with keeping 4 strings on possibly for this. Yeah, this happens occasionally. So where the Allen bolts become a little tricky to access, so I'm just kind of lifting the bridge up at the back a little bit, and then assuming that you've loosened off the clamp at the top, just feed the end of the string through. I try and keep as straight a line as possible going through the hole in the machine head in the capstan. And then with the thick E string, the best way to tackle that is just to pull it as tight as you can. See, I'm keeping a good grip on the end there. And with my Planet Waves string winder slash string cutter, it's like two handy tools in one. I'm turning the machine head so that the hole is now parallel to the frets, so it's kind of going that way. I've still got a good grip on the end of the string, and what you do when you're looking down onto the capstan on this type of guitar where you've got 6 strings on the same side, the strings tend to wrap anti-clockwise around the capstan. What you do, you get the end of the string and pull it clockwise, so you go in the opposite way to how it normally wraps around. I'm using my finger to just keep it tight against keep the string tight against the capstan, and I'm going to pass the string underneath itself between the capstan and the nut. I'm going to pull it as tight as I can. You don't want any air gaps between the string and the capstan, so you know, that's important. So you pull it tight so that if you do let it go, the string doesn't come all the way back out again, you know, it doesn't bounce out, so it kind of locks it in position. The final thing is I'm putting my thumb underneath the loose end of the string, which is now underneath the rest of the string, the main part of the string, and keeping it as close to the capstan as I can. I'm also using my finger to push on the rest of the string there to make sure that's tight. I'm gonna bring it over the top of itself and push it down so that it forms a kink. That locks the string in position, and it means that obviously once I've let it go, that hasn't just sprung back. If it does, you just need to push down a bit harder and try and form a proper kink there where it sort of the string bends over itself. If that's successful, the next thing you do is take your string winder and just I'm just going to tune that roughly to tune. I'm not too bothered if it's spot on at this stage. Cool. Now with a thick E string, I've kept it tight because the coils, the wrap around the string stops it from slipping up to a point. So you don't need loads of wraps around the capstan to stop the string falling out, and especially when you've done that lock, you've sort of locked the string over itself. I've pretty much just got half a turn there, so the string's not even, it hasn't even got a full 360-degree wrap around the capstan. So I'm just going to snip it off pretty close to the end of the string. There you go. It's nice and neat. So that's what you want. If your audience gets a little bit close while you're playing, the last thing you want to do is skewer them with the end of your string, so you keep it nice and short. Right, so I've now got 4 strings. I've got to try and remember which ones I've changed. So with the loose packet, I'm going to just put that the other side of the guitar so I can keep tabs, because I don't want to take a string off that I've just put on. Now here's the thing, that sounds daft, but yeah, it does happen. Right, I've got 2 spaces there. I've got the G string and the B string, so I'm going to do the G string next. Now these things are lethal. It's the most deadly string on the guitar, this one, because the thicker strings are too thick to dig in your finger and the thinner strings tend to bend out the way. This one, it'll just stick straight in your finger. So it's the same procedure, so just be careful. I'm taking the loose end, again, feeding it in between the square block in the bridge, which is loose, and the rest of the saddle, and just tightening it up using this Allen bolt. I'm not over tightening it. I don't use my thumb right on the end of the Allen key. I tend to use it about halfway down, so it's more difficult to put loads and loads of torque onto through the Allen bolt. What you don't want is to over tighten it, form a groove in the saddle, which at the end of the day, it's only brass, so it's not the hardest of materials. What happens then is the next time you change the strings, you've got to put even more pressure on the saddle. They can be replaced, you can buy them, but why put yourself through that? So yeah, it's surprising how little pressure you need to clamp the string. It's not that much pressure at all. So once again, I'm going to feed this through the nut, and I'm going to do the same thing. Try and get the holes in the capstan to line up with where the string's got to go. So it's just a straight line. Now with this one, because it hasn't got a coil wrap around it, I'm leaving a little bit more slack so that I can wrap a little bit more around the capstan. So I'll keep in it's about 2 fingers worth I've got there. I'm going to just tighten the string. So once again, the holes are in line with the frets, if you like. They're parallel to the frets. Once again, I'm going to take my thumb, keep it really close. I'm actually touching the capstan as I'm doing this, and I'm just going to turn my thumb around there and see what's happened. The string hasn't flexed back. It's just kind of stayed where it was. That's what you want. Keep it nice and tight. Keep it hard against the capstan. Pass it underneath itself again. And now I've got a bit of loose end here, so I'm going to pull this tight so that when I bring the loose end over itself and lock it down like that, again, it just keeps it tight. Everything's really close to the capstan. There's no air gaps. And I'm still keeping the main part of the string tight using a combination of this finger, and I'm using the middle fingers on this hand just to sort of pull upwards and just try and stop any slackness as I wind the string on. So yeah, always make sure the string wraps downwards along on the capstan, so that when it's tight, there should be an angle as the string passes over the nut. It should go down rather than horizontal, so it'll work better then. So I haven't got perfect pitch, but it's, you know, I'll get it fairly close. It's just trying to remember the sounds, you know. So when you're putting the strings on, you haven't got to get them perfectly to tune before you go on to the next one. You know, just get them roughly there. Okay. Now I've got that one on. I might as well put the B string on as well. More the merrier. Put the packet there so I know I've done it. And once again, chop the ball off. Push it down between the metal block and the saddle. Tighten it up using the Allen bolt. Again, try not to over tighten it. The thinner the string, the more difficult it is to feel how tight you're doing it. You know, it tends to lock up fairly quickly. It's something you'd get used to with practice. You know, you sort of get to feel how tight things should be. But one thing you can do, if you've never done this before with a Floyd Rose, you can always put a few extra wraps on, and then if for some reason you don't get enough tightness on the bolt and the string pops out, you can always just loosen a bit off the capstan end and then just pull it back through, and you can just put it back in and tighten it a little bit more, you know. But it's better to do it that way than over tighten it. So once again, because it's a plain string, I'm leaving a couple of fingers worth of slack. Tighten the machine head so that the holes in the capstan line up with the frets. Sorry if you've heard this before, but it's worth repeating. Pass the string underneath itself. Pull the main end of the string tight, and use your thumb just to lock over itself and form that kink, so that when you let the loose end of the string go, it doesn't just spring back. Cool, now we're getting somewhere. And I say once again, just make sure that as the string wraps around the capstan, it goes down rather than up, so that you get a nice angle as the string goes over the nut. Right then, kind of close. I think my pitch memory, the way I tend to do this, I always tend to go slightly flat. I mean, you can judge that for yourself when you watch this. But right then, so that's three of them. So I've got three left. I've got the thin E, the D, and the A. Those are the ones that were on the guitar originally. So I'm going to take the A string off first. I'm going to do the thin E last, because with the Floyd Rose bridge, once you take one string off, the tension increases on all the other strings because it sits back, because the springs inside the guitar are pulling the bridge back. So, because the thin E is the most fragile string, I don't want that to get tightened after I've put it on. I suppose another way of doing it would be to just not tighten it all the way to pitch, but I prefer to err on the side of caution. And as any of my previous band colleagues will tell you, I like to get my money's worth out of a set of strings. So, so yeah, that's how I roll. Right, get this one in. So once again, just putting the loose end in between the square block in the Floyd Rose and the saddle, tightening it up. Now with the A string, when you're tightening it, same as with the thick E string, it's a little bit spongy, so you can, you could probably have a bit of tolerance as to how tight you tighten it. But the main thing is just don't overdo it. Now you notice I'm having to just loosen the locking nut off a little bit just to get the string through. There's only a few threads on the locking nut Allen key, and sometimes you might overdo it. You know, you might pull the thing off altogether. It's not the end of the world. You just got to make sure when you put it back, the clamp is shaped. It's got like almost like a pyramid, or like the roof of a house or something. You've got to make sure that the peak lines up with the string. You don't want it sort of lining up with the frets, so it's got to go that way. Otherwise, it just won't be clamped properly. So that's another top tip. Okay. Now with this one, I'm not going to give it 2 fingers because again, because it's got the coil on there, it kind of locks over itself. And I might just leave 1 finger's worth of tightness. So you know, that'll be enough for it to grip onto itself. Once again, get the hole in the capstan parallel to the frets. Form the string around the capstan so that if I let it go, oops, there you go, I've passed it under the D string. That can happen. Just got to make sure it only passes under itself. Pull it tight, make sure there's no air between the string and the capstan. Lock it over itself. With this hand, I've still got the string pulled tight, so just wind it up. If the loose end does kind of stick up as you're turning it, just push it back down again and just locks it more firmly in position. So I'll just try and keep a bit of tension on the other strings there. So it's very convenient to just take all the strings off your guitar so that it makes it easier to get it clean. Even on a guitar without a trem, I wouldn't recommend that, because inside the neck is a metal rod which balances out the tension of the strings. If you take all the strings off, that metal rod's got nothing to sort of balance up, so what it does, it just pulls the neck back. And it doesn't always come back into position as it should do. So I mean, even if you've got a really thick neck like on an old Les Paul, you know, it's still a bit of a dodgy thing to do. So I always leave at least a couple of strings on while you're changing. Okay, 2 to go. So it's the D string next. The D string and the thin E string they're the most they've got the most tension of all the strings on the guitar. So I do try and leave those till last, so that I don't so that they don't get too stressed too early on. You know, I like to get my strings to bed in fairly gently. Okay. So keep my old strings nice and neat. I won't be using them again. I don't buoy them or anything like that. Like I'm not that tight. Okay. So same procedure. Chop the end off. Fix the loose end in between the block and the saddle. You know the drill by now. So let's try and gauge the tightness of it. While I'm here, I've got a bit of a gap there, and I notice there's a bit of crap on there, so I'm going to just wipe that bit of dust off whilst it's easy to access. Okay. Oh, this one's been a little bit tricky. So what I'm going to do, just take that off altogether, take the clamp off, feed it through, and then just put the clamp back. This one, I'm going to leave a little bit more loose, back to the 2 fingers, I think, for this one. Another reason for doing that is you sometimes get sharp edges appearing on the corner of the hole on the capstan. And if you haven't got enough string wrapped round, sometimes that sharp edge digs into the string and kind of chafes it, and that causes it to fail. So you'll break a string. Sometimes when it's virtually new, I've had that happen on a few guitars now. So on the more fragile strings, it's worth just putting a couple of extra wraps around the machine head. But I try not to overdo it, because what happens is the more wraps, as you turn the string around the capstan, it also twists the string, so that's going to put a bit of extra wear and tear on it. So the fewer wraps you can get away with, the better, definitely. Okay, we're nearly there. I'm just going to tighten that up a little bit. Another thing which I didn't do to start with, but I probably should, is when you put new strings on a Floyd Rose, it's always good to reset the fine tuners. You don't want to leave these screwed in all the way. Cool, that's quite slack still, so. Cool, one more to go. What I'll do with the fine tuners before I finish off, the setup process, I'll just wind them in a little bit, so that when I tighten the locking nut, I've got a bit. Sometimes when you tighten the locking nut, it twists the string slightly, and that causes it to go sharp. So if you've wound the fine tuners in a little bit, you can always loosen them off and just find, just get it from sharp to in tune. That's what you want. Cool. Last one then. Okay. Very spindly string, this one. On the Jackson, I'm using what they call nines, which means the strings range from 9 thousandths of an inch to 42 thousandths of an inch for the fat one. Okay, so this one's taking a little more. That's right. Yeah, the thinner strings are quite difficult to kind of judge. The tightness, the optimum tightness, but it's something you do get better with practice. And when it comes to, obviously strings, they're not cheap. So if you buy, you can sometimes buy them in packs of 3, so that's always a good idea. So if you do make a mistake on one, you've always got spares. So there's not so much spare string on the end of this one, so makes it a little bit more tricky to wrap around, to sort of lock over, but we're getting there. So again, I've still got my fingers on my right hand, just lifting up the main part of the string to just try and keep it tight. Okay, finally, just snip that off, and we should be more or less in business. Now, I haven't got a tuner handy. That was a bit of an oversight. So if I do that, I think you should be able to see that. Yeah, it's kind of close. But that's it. That's how you put strings on a guitar with a Floyd Rose. Thanks for watching.